Welcome to Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness with your hosts, Chris Noble and Bill Peratzman. This episode is part 2 of 3. We extend our discussion of vibration and harmonics from part 1 in ways that may surprise you. We clarify and answer questions such as, what does it really mean to raise my vibration? Or where am I on the scale of conscious vibration? Or what can my emotions tell me about my pathway through life? How do I emphasize the harmonics I want? What powerful inspiration can come from what we believe is a negative emotional experience, or from experiences where two contrasting emotions coexist? Finally, we boldly offer a way of concocting states of consciousness that we want. We'll be talking about all that and much, much more, as always in these open conversations, here on Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness. So let's talk about this whole thing that you hear a lot, raise your vibration. Yeah. I mean, I get that. I understand what people are saying. They really want to encourage an improvement of consciousness. You know, Chris, when I hear that, that's exactly how I feel. It's like, okay, yeah, raise your vibration. But if I'm a musician and I raise my vibration, so I go from that lovely low E that I love, and I raise my vibration to an F. And I've raised my vibration, everybody. Look out, Bill's raising his vibration. There is a tie-in. There is a tie-in here. I can see you're ready to explain it. So go, man. I'm going to shut up for a second.
No, not at all, Bill. It's actually I was actually going to say I can see how infuriating or sometimes annoying it might sound to a lot of people too. Like, just raise your vibration. You're like, what does that mean? But really, what the heck does that mean? And the thing to go back to, it's like, okay, let's take a step back for a second. And like when we say like what is vibration, right? And when we're talking about vibration in terms of raising your vibration, we're talking about something very specific. And we know through experiments like Dr. Emoto and the hidden messages in water. For those of you who aren't familiar, check out that book. It's fantastic. And what he did was took photographs of water with different emotions projected. I mean, just literally, someone thinking either hateful thoughts or loving thoughts, and the same water, would either turn into a symmetrical, perfect geometrical shape if it was a loving frequency, a loving thought or feeling like I love you. Even when he would write down I love you, and then turn that and then face it towards the water would actually again shape and change into a crystalline structure, versus I hate you, the water crystals turn into these muddy, unsymmetrical things. So we know, again, we're 43% water, plus everything is vibration. So clearly our thoughts and our emotions are a frequency. They all have a different range of frequencies. And then we can move over to, the Hawkins scale of consciousness. And now this isn't necessarily correlating with actual frequencies, but we've got feelings like shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear at lower, let's not maybe say frequencies, but lower states of vibration. We'll just call them that. And he's this
We're going to get
Hawkins.
ourselves in trouble, but let's do it. How about conscious vibration?
There we go.
Because we
Okay.
got
Thank you,
music
Bill.
vibration, conscious vibration.
Conscious vibration. So we know that guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger are lower on that scale of vibration, consciousness vibration. Courage is kind of a middle point. And then after that, we've got neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and at the very top, enlightenment. And really what that means, when I hear raise your vibration, it doesn't mean like stop thinking negative thoughts necessarily, or stop being, sad or angry or having these other emotions. We're humans. We're kind of designed to have a massive array of emotions. I look at it as a GPS, actually. Our emotions are really amazing at telling us what we need to perhaps look at within ourselves. So it's not that you don't want to disregard your emotion. That's important. However, when you can become more of an observer rather than living in your emotion, which I'm sure all that are listening can relate to, living in those emotions. And that's where things can get pretty miserable and pretty difficult. And raising your vibration just allows you to come up to these other places of, let's just use neutrality as an example. When you can become neutral about a lot of things, that's one of the core principles of human mastery, coming from these ancient hermetic principles. And neutrality, and also ancient Eastern principles, neutrality is a great way to balance all of the emotions and help yourself come into a higher state of conscious vibration. So raising your vibration is literally like how the water crystals in our body change with love. It's as we can move and understand our emotions better, we will raise our vibration, we will raise our consciousness into these areas that we'll still feel, aspects of grief and anger and shame, but we're able to understand them more, move through them quickly, alchemize them, put them to use, understand what they're there for, and then move through that. Therefore, again, staying on a more higher level of, let's say, love, joy, and peace. And therefore, you're vibrating at a higher, frequency or vibration of enlightenment. The last thing I'll say on this is that I think if that doesn't make sense to anyone, just think about this. Think about someone that you've met in your life who you feel so good when you're around them. You just feel fantastic. You feel seen, you feel loved and appreciated, and fun, and maybe you're laughing a lot and just being like, wow, when you leave seeing that person, or let's say it was a one-time encounter, maybe something special, like the Dalai Lama or somebody like that, who's just emanating these really incredible vibrations of consciousness. You feel differently. Every human on this planet feels differently around these people, and you know it when you leave that. And that is just a very basic example of what it means to really raise your vibration. Is these people are embodying that. They're also therefore emitting that frequency, and therefore that frequency comes into your field of frequency. And what happens is when there's a higher frequency meeting with the lower frequency, what typically happens is the lower frequency gets brought up to that higher frequency. And so that's why it's nice to be around these people, is because they're bringing you up to their nice love frequency, and you're feeling all lovey-dovey after, and you don't know why.
I totally get that. You've played with a Hammond B3, right?
I
The
have.
drawbars.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, one of the amazing things about the Hammond B3 was that it
It's
had
an
what
organ for
16?
those.
It's an organ. Yeah, it's
It's
an
an
organ,
organ.
electronic organ back in the day when we called them electronic. Uh, but they had tone generators, and you could choose which one of the tone generators would be emphasized for a particular note based on how you set the drawbars. And the sound of, you can hear so many kinds of different sounds from a B3 out there. You recognize it's coming from the same instrument, but it's phenomenal how you can adjust those things. It's like playing with a synthesizer back in the day. But the drawbars on a Hammond are unique because instead of being infinitely variable, they allow you to choose the harmonic that you want. So if your fundamental tone is neutral, and for want of anything better than that, let's say we're going to have a fundamental conscious tone, and we're going to arbitrarily associate that fundamental consciousness tone with 40 hertz because we've been using 40 hertz for a while. So that's like the fundamental tone here. It's the tone you can hear is E1, and it's this fundamental consciousness that's neutral that is beautiful. One of the cool things about music is that for any note that occurs naturally, there are harmonics. And the Hammond drawbars let you choose the harmonics that you want. You can pull out first, like I think there's two on the low end, and then you get the fundamental tones, the third one up. If I can remember, donate on me if I've got this wrong, folks. But you can choose your fundamental tone, which will be E, and then you can add notes, harmonics below it, and you can add a bunch of harmonics above it. In fact, you don't have to use the actual fundamental. If you pull out like the second or the first harmonic, we'll call it, it's the harmonic that exists. If you have E40, the harmonic would be what? 80. It'd be double. That's the first harmonic. So you'd hear this note that's 80 hertz, and you could just pull out that drawbar and play everything in 80 hertz instead of playing it in 40 hertz. It's really weird and crazy. And if you're a keyboard player, the first time you mess with this, it'll blow your mind. But after that, it starts to make sense. But in any case, any tone that occurs naturally, 40 hertz or otherwise, has these harmonics. And the first harmonic is double. And then there's you'll recognize it if you're into computer science, that these things are actually, I wanted to say sine waves, but they're not. They're, I can't think of it now. Squares. Anyway, they double. And as they double, the pitch changes. So there you are listening to 40 hertz, very happy thinking that you're in 40 hertz. And actually, you're listening to 40 hertz and you're listening to 80 hertz. And you're also listening to something that's like around, I don't know, 1300 something or 130, and then you're listening to 1700 or 170. So there's all of these notes that are also in this 40 hertz experience, all these other vibrations. And while we tend to think of them as generally getting higher and higher, there are those that get lower and lower as well. And all of them are packed into that 140 hertz experience, provided that the sound is being made by a device that's capable of making natural sound with harmonics. And we can get into all of that. So when people tell me raise my vibration, I'm like, okay, what would be more precise to say raise your vibration, or maybe emphasize the third harmonic? Now, here's where this gets weird. Like if you're at neutral, and let's say that's 40 hertz, and your consciousness fundamental is 40 hertz, and there are harmonics to that, where do those harmonics hit? Somewhere further up the consciousness ladder, right? As well as some further down the consciousness ladder. They're all harmonics of that one vibration. And so if someone's saying,
I've never thought about that. Sorry,
Bill, you're
Bill.
cool at neutral, but get to courage. Emphasize your second harmonic.
And the way you're saying that, I'm like, is it possible then that we can, and I'm sure it is, that we can experience all of these things simultaneously? So you're experiencing this
Well, yeah,
range of consciousness almost like at once, because life is a series of harmonics, I guess, right? It's
that's the richness of
complex.
music, even with one tone, man.
Yeah.
And even if you're just listening to one tone, you're also hearing all the harmonics. As
Listen
far out
to
as your ear can go up and as far down as can go low.
great examples are Indian music.
Oh, yeah.
Their drone, when they make a drone with like, and then they play
Yeah.
the sitar over it or something. I mean, my God, they could play like two notes, and all of a sudden the two notes sound like
It's
2,000 notes. And you're like, what is going on? It's why it's such a spiritual and psychedelic experience just coming from the instruments. I mean, there's certain ancient instruments where you got to wonder, once again, were they just doing this for entertainment purposes, or is there some more, there's other things going on here, like consciousness shifting very consciously making these instruments with that purpose in mind, because my God, I mean, you ever feel it when you listen to some of them, and they're
right.
huge. If anyone's seen a sitar, this thing's massive. Like
Yeah.
they have to create these big bodies to house these, to be able to create big frequencies, right?
And to
Especially
magnify,
before.
like the piano, grand piano, the bigger it is, the better it is at harmonics. It's
Yes, that's
louder,
right.
but it's better at harmonics. You can hear them more precisely.
Interesting.
Take
So
away
this
the harmonics
concert,
and everything goes flat.
that's right. Concert grands are so long, but they get to create some incredible harmonics. There's these certain fiddles that I know they have a lot of unison strings. Again, for those who aren't familiar with that term in music, it just means you have the same note, but you have two strings playing the exact same note, or sometimes more than two strings playing the
Yeah.
same note. Why would you do that? It's kind of inefficient. Well, you actually do it because it creates these harmonics again.
Mandolin,
And
right?
oh
Two
yeah,
two
big time.
strings for all four notes.
100%. So it creates, this very specific feel. So it's interesting that you say it and you're describing it this way. I actually haven't thought about that in that way, like looking at harmonics and just how like one note can there, of course, has these multiples of itself, just like everything in nature, the Fibonacci sequence. We see it all the time with what's the fractal mathematics
Yeah,
and all
yeah.
that kind of stuff in nature. So, as above, so below, everything in the micro is the same as the macro. And so our harmonics kind of that. So it's like, yeah, we have this one note that we're technically playing at 40 hertz here, but we know that when it interacts with the human body and acoustic spaces and all this stuff, it starts to vibrate off everything else and then creates harmonics through that. And then all of a sudden, it's like, again, life is a complex thing. It's simple in some aspects, but then you think about just one note and you're like, yeah, but it starts off as one note and then creates a whole bunch of harmonics that are super complex. So it's just
I'd
interesting.
I'd like to think that within every level of the Hawkins scale of consciousness, the the fundamental level, whatever it might be, also contains within it all the harmonics that are specific to that level. And there's no way, I don't know, going off on a limb here, guys, this is logic, but it kind of makes sense when you think about how the human body responds to the vibration of sound, that it might also respond to a vibration of consciousness in a similar way. And what's a low level consciousness scale? Shame.
That's the lowest is shame.
So if there are harmonics to shame, what are they? Um, what's half the length of a shame string, right? And then what's a quarter of that? And are those then also vibrations that are contained within the vibration of shame, but just not emphasized?
I see here on the Dawkins scale, it's like these are examples of shame, which could, in a way, not just be examples, but they're harmonics, like miserable or humiliation. These could be harmonics of shame, right? These are like,
Yeah,
if shame is a 20 on the scale, then maybe humiliation is a 10, or miserable is a 15, or what I don't know, right? Or
yeah. It's
it's different, yeah, variables of it.
to expand around the possibility of this changes that whole thing from raise your vibration, for me anyway, to sort of emphasize your harmonic. If I'm coming
Interesting.
in with a big old kick drum in the middle of a string quartet, I better play it so that I emphasize the harmonics that harmonize with what the quartet's doing versus just having my big house beat. Same instrument,
Should sound really cool.
wouldn't it though?
Really would. I'm like thinking, writing and stuff. I'm like, I love classical music with a beat to it, but you're absolutely right. So it's interesting. I mean, so it's also asking for me, it asks the question is, and I think this is possible, which is I feel sometimes in moments of where I've had, let's say that sometimes very ambiguous term as enlightenment, also known as powerful inspiration, attractor energy fields that influence all of yourself and mankind, supposedly. But that's what they say with enlightenment. These are different ways of describing it. But can it come from places of anger and fear and grief? Can you be in some of those frequencies and yet have an epiphany moment? Because I know I have. I've experienced something when sometimes feeling so low, all of a sudden the clouds part.
Yep.
You're just
Yep.
like, oh my God. Oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute. It all makes sense now.
Well, this brings an interesting question because, like we were saying the last time, part do emotions play in this? And I feel like emotions are guide rails that kind of help me understand what internally I'm experiencing so that I can choose, how to manipulate that energy. But
Emotion,
yeah,
energy,
emotion, right?
emotion.
Yeah. But getting all stuck, and I've had those epiphanies, in the midst of anger and grief and stuff like that too. So I'm very judgment neutral about about emotions, because the other weird thing that can happen is you can feel like really experience two different emotions that are incredibly contrasting at the same time.
Yep. Happens more frequently to me, I find too. Maybe it's because the more you become open and less judgmental towards your emotions, it allows you to observe more of them and then be like, holy cow, I'm feeling a lot of, let's say, sadness and at the same time, joy. I've had that
Yeah.
at the same time. It makes no sense. Complete paradoxes.
And that top of the
Um,
roller coaster where you're terrified and also incredibly excited.
yeah, exactly, right? Like these parallels that they're
That's
really not so far apart. Like, a
it's
lot of these
legit.
things. Well, that's the thing. Like, I know there's this scale, and we're just going off of one guy's scale of consciousness. Maybe that isn't the way it necessarily is. Maybe the scale, instead of it being from low to high, is like this aside. It's like a horizontal versus a vertical up and down, like lowest to highest. Maybe it's like the light spectrum that we have, right? Where I think, what is it? Red is the lowest or the highest. I think it's the lowest frequency of light, and then ultraviolet's the highest or whatever. And but it's on
Yeah.
a scale that's horizontal, not up and down, and kind of looking at our emotions as, yeah, like obviously you don't want to feel sad all the time and depressed. It does mean that you're in a lower state of consciousness, but it's recognizing them as tools, like you said, Bill. Like I think of it the same way. So I don't know. This is
I
interesting.
try to get to 3D on that stuff because that's the only way I can make two things that are different, opposite, somehow be okay together. But when I do that, it winds up looking like a Mobius strip.
What
And I
does that
can't,
look like? What does that look like
oh, it's
again?
like it infinitely curves in on itself. It's just a like a 1 inch wide strip of paper that connects to itself in a way that it is neither the outside of the paper nor the inside of the paper. And
Right,
it's
right.
infinitely one piece of paper. It's
Yeah. Well, that's the thing when we try to conceptualize 3D reality in these slightly brilliant bodies, but currently a little limited with our knowledge.
Quite limited.
I've heard like, what was it? Oh my God, I'm blanking on the famous scientist, but anyway, he always described like, look, the people that would live in the second dimension would have no idea what you talk about with this third, like your reality would seem really peculiar to them. And if you try to even show up in their reality, you would look like a stick figure. Like you wouldn't even look like your three-dimensional self, just like we have higher dimensional aspects of ourselves, and a lot of us don't know what that even looks like or are even aware of that. But does it mean it's not there? Of course not, right? Like we look at reality through a very fine pinhole. It's like looking at going through your day wearing, this like looking through a telescope that is blacked out except for this tiny little, dot in the middle that you can see through. It's very, very limited. So who knows what's going on? Who knows what harmonics are coming out all the time or all around us? I think a lot of animals or other people are sometimes more sensitive to these things. I know the cats that I'm with right now, they look at stuff all the time.
I'm laughing my
So,
head off because you and I don't have to be scientists.
no.
We get to be creatives, and we can say, who the hell knows what's going on?
But I think that's for me, it gets me off the hook or it gets us off
Right?
the hook. Like
Right?
I hate pretending like we know everything. I think that's
Yeah.
another issue that we sometimes deal with is that, oh yeah, we obviously know this. It's like, come on, we all knew that we were the center of the universe a couple hundred years ago, and then
Yep. Yep.
that's not true. We all knew that the Earth was flat, and we all know that's not true, or whatever.
Well, here I'll take one.
Most-
Here's a good assumption
yeah,
buster. We've all seen the water study, right? How beautiful water is under the influence of love, and we've
yep,
seen those things where they put like sand on a vibrating plate, and
yep,
it makes different
cymatics,
patterns, right, and all of that. And we tend to go that, oh, well, that vibration must be really good for me, right? If I can dial
right?
in the vibration of that love frequency, that must be really good for me. And I mean, I'm not saying that it isn't, right? That seems like a good assumption to make.
Yep.
But what if there's a better frequency? What if the frequency, for example, of love and sadness combined, the binaural beat, the interference pattern that exists between love and sadness is the real juice?
Hmm.
And until we learn how to do love and sadness real well, we don't get to have that particular vibrational frequency,
Wow. Now I'm thinking of like you're like a chef with emotion. And you're like, okay, what if this taste mix it with that taste? Just
right?
see, it's like, wow, I've never thought of
Right? And
consciousness
what
this
if,
way.
what if it wasn't just about all love and light, and our job was to be the chef, you
Right.
know? And hey, let's face it, we all like to be happy. That's not a thing. But what
Of
if there's a
course.
level of happiness that's better than pure happiness? What if a level of happiness that's better than pure happiness is when you combine happiness and fear and anger and grief in just the right amount, that it gives you this boost that you would never have had without the other flavors?
Mm. And it's like you can peacefully live with all the emotions,
Oh, you can be a master
you
of, you can
know?
be
Yeah.
you can be a Michelin 5 star at that stuff, at
Yeah.
levels of consciousness,
Wow.
whatever they might be. I love to be a neutral, man. That's a beautiful place to be, but I can't stay there very long because the next thing comes along and pushes me, you know, in
It's like
another place.
you're navigating down this river and like that's where you want to be is in the middle of the river, but obviously these currents take you a bit to the side, the right, the left, right, whatever. It's that's just how it works. Everything's in a state of motion. So this planet is hurtling through space pretty quickly, and so is our sun, so is our galaxy. I mean, everything's literally in motion and subatomically in motion. So yeah, it makes sense, right? But it's funny, I'm really thinking now about this chef's approach to consciousness and using different emotions as different almost tastes. Sometimes you add that little bit of salt onto your chocolate and ice cream or something and you're like, why is the salt making it so delicious? I wouldn't have thought with this sweet I had this little savory, but that's delish. And so what's that like with emotion? I know sadness and love are beautiful. I know I've written a lot of music with those two combined. It's great for creativity.
Oh yeah, Chopin would
So
agree. By the way, I think he found
yeah,
great sadness and love, and it took nothing from the beauty of the experience, right?
Oh, yeah. I know in my past, before I got better at just kind of navigating my emotions and appreciating all their importance, I would say that when I was depressed, I always wrote my best music.
I know, right? That place of incredible creativity is the very place that everybody said, raise your vibration. What? No way. I'm happy in this
I'm
place.
writing hits here. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. But so many hits have come from there. So think about, so much music has come from utter
The
despair and
Doors,
anguish, you know?
such incredible, yeah, incredible, incredible. I mean, in the classical world, you name it.
Beethoven, you know, like everybody, everyone was
So much
suffering.
literature, art. Look at Van Gogh, for heaven's
Oh
sakes.
my
You
God.
know, if
Yeah.
that guy had been happy, happy, joy, joy, we never would seen what he looks like with his ear cut off, or the Scream, or that was Edward Monk. Sorry, or Starry Night. Um,
But it's
right?
true, right? Like all these famous artists are tortured souls in a lot of way, and not that you have to be to create. Again, I think that's an old paradigm that also does say like it's that old kind of stereotype of the tortured artist and
Yeah,
all that stuff that I know we're moving out of that. However, it's an example of what beauty can come from, supposed suffering and despair, which I'm not taking away. It is suffering and despair by definition, but life is complex, and having that, let's say, suffering mixed with that, um well, with, let's say, mixed with an art form that brings you into a state of joy, because sometimes I'm only feeling the sadness, but then I play piano and something really beautiful comes out, and all of a
yeah,
sudden I'm feeling the joy with the sadness, but the
yeah,
middle, like the conduit or the middle thing was the piano,
yeah. The
which is actually
blending
really,
of the
it's like it's the spatula or the blender.
yeah.
Really interesting way to look at that.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier about the language that we have is so limited on this stuff. Part of the torture of being an artist is trying to get to convey it, trying to get it across, trying to take your thing, your idea, your creation, and offer that in a way that other people understand. And isn't that what's happening in marketing today? I mean, people are getting better and better at marketing and getting better, better at making, entertainment, and everybody wants to get it right. And yeah, we do. We do want to get it right, but there is no one right way. There's a way that will resonate if you are talking to the right person at the right time. If all the stars line up, right, and you absolutely fall in love at first sight, that's possible. But for the most part, it's just hard work. And if you can't paint what you want to and nothing's selling, and you wind up cutting off your ear as a symbolic gesture, or maybe you're just crazy, um, part of that is because you're willing to wrestle with these concepts and let your brain explode when it has to reconcile sadness and joy and make a piece of music out of it that will last for hundreds of years, you know, or make a painting that nobody will understand in your time because they aren't there yet, but maybe in 3 or 4 generations it'll make sense, you know.
And still decoding Leonardo da Vinci, that
Yeah.
guy, that
Well, I'm
that
still decoding
genius.
myself.
Fair enough. Forget da Vinci.
you
Oh my
know.
God.
So for heaven's sakes, people, raise your vibration. If that means something to you, do that. But also understand that it's so much richer than just having the right number of hertz dialed in on the wheel.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it. Don't
And
miss that.
don't miss that. And there's nothing wrong with any emotion. And not that we want to be stuck in states of anger and fear forever. But it's just getting that different perspective on, it's a tool like everything. It's how you use it. How do you use that anger? Sometimes it can be a great motivational emotion to get to take action on something that's important, and that's great. Now, do you want to stay in that emotion for the whole time and make all your decisions from there? No, definitely not. But it's like the chef that's creating a very complex dinner. You got, your appetizers, you've got your main course, and you've got your dessert. And within just even those, there's a lot of complex tastes and journeys that you want to take your clients or the people that are eating your dinner. You want to take them through this journey. And I know that the Michelin star chefs, that's exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it in the most creative ways with tastes and combinations of tastes, that really the point of that's how they get their Michelin stars, is when they can create kind of like new tastes and things that no one's ever experienced before, and therefore taking the eater, the experiencer on an incredible journey. So, that's really what it's a metaphor for obviously our lives, and that everything is kind of color. It's all information, and we get to decide what we want to do with it, essentially.
Remember that incredible Robin Williams movie, What Dreams May Come? If you're
Yeah,
listening to this right now, that's a great visual metaphor for what it is that Chris and I are trying to talk about here, using words and referring to music. Obviously, we can't play music at you right now, but if you want to hear how that has affected us creatively as musicians, please do. You can find us on SoundCloud and Spotify. We're just all over the place out there. Chris's website, my website, but take a listen to the music you love, kind of with new ears now, and not for having it to have a specific effect on you, but for it to have an effect that you don't yet know, to be curious about it.
I love
And then
that.
let us know how that went, Give us your music and what it did to you.
Let's keep experimenting together and figure out this crazy reality that we live in. Or you know what? I'm letting go of needing to know everything and figuring out one of my
Amen.
I won't even call it a New Year's resolution. It's more just something I wanted to bring into 2023, is that I don't need to know everything. I really don't need to understand everything to an in-depth level. Of course, I enjoy that pursuit. It's actually fun. I love learning, but it can also, just like these emotions, without balance and perspective, you can get dragged down this really exhausting path of having to know and understand everything, which, to be honest, as great as our bodies are and as amazing I really think as our true potential is as humans, it's still limited, and we can't possibly know everything, because I just don't think that's part of what life is. I think we're supposed to have that mystery and that magic and that ambiguity sometimes. It adds some spice. It adds that unknown. That's the movie, right? Do you want to know the ending of the film that you're watching? Of course you don't. It's so much more exciting when it's keeping you guessing. So I'm also looking forward to letting go of this need to completely understand it all. But I love going into it on these podcasts. It's a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I appreciate the opportunity to dig into this stuff kind of in real time. We never really know what we're going to get into here, and I think we found a couple of good places this time around.
Heck yeah, I love it. It's been really fun. I can't. I'm trying to think now how long we've been recording this podcast for.
At
Um,
least a year.
Over a year
This is
for
going to be
sure.
episode like 39 or something when it drops. So,
There you go, people.
yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone who's listening.
Thanks everyone who's listening, and thank you, Bill, for always having these great conversations. I always appreciate it, my friend. This is really great stuff.
You're welcome, Chris, and likewise, thank you.
Thank you. Aho, everybody. Take care.
Aho. Thank you for listening in on our conversation and for taking time to show your appreciation with a like, share, or subscribe. Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness is a practice of spontaneity, and we welcome your comments, ideas, and questions. There are ways to connect with us in the show notes, so let us hear from you. Until next time, this is Bill Protzman along with Chris Noble wishing you great musical health. Samara Huchaya.